Now to Rick Santelli in Chicago with a very special guest to discuss the gravity of the Eurozone crisis. Rick, take it away.
A very, very special guest, Nigel Farage. He's the leader of the Independence Party in the UK, and he's prone to a few rants every now and again. But his best one that I've seen was on the 13th of June, and I'll do a setup here. He was in front of he was talking to a group of European leaders, and the Prime Minister of Spain was about 15 feet from him. Here's what he said. Having listened to Spanish Prime Minister Mr. Rajoy over the previous couple of weeks, telling us that there would not be a bailout, I got the feeling after all his twists and turns, he's just about the most incompetent leader in the whole of Europe. And that's saying something because there is pretty stiff competition. Welcome, Mr. Farage, and maybe you can expound upon the genius of mutual indebtedness. I hope everybody looks at the YouTube. I happen to agree with most of what you say. What's going on in Europe, and is it really beyond getting fixed?
Oh, it's a mess, make no doubt about it. The trouble is, though, it's bedeviled with complexity. I mean, so much so that after the last summit of European leaders, the Finnish and the Dutch prime ministers seem to have a different interpretation to what was agreed to everybody else. And indeed now, in the last 48 hours, Angela Merkel in Germany is having a row with her own party about what she did or did not agree. So the whole thing's a mess. And what I've tried to do in these speeches in the European Parliament is I've tried to make things a little bit simpler, just so that people can understand a few of the basic facts. I mean, here is just one example for you. The 100 billion tranche that was agreed to help the Spanish banks, some of that money, 20% of it, actually comes from Italy, which is a country which is teetering on the brink. Under the terms of a deal, the Italians have to lend to Spain at a rate of 3%, but it's costing them 7% to borrow that money on the open market. So actually, this wonderful bailout mechanism, which is designed to save the euro, is actually driving countries like Italy closer towards needing a bailout itself. And they've now constructed what is called the ESM, the European Stability Mechanism. And again, a huge amount of the money that will be needed for that fund comes from countries that have already been bailed out. So actually what we're seeing is the same parcel of money going round and round in circles, which is why I was tempted to say that it's beginning to resemble a giant Ponzi scheme.
Now, and you know, even in the U.S., there's money going around in circles between one part of the government issuing, another part buying and stockpiling by business, money that's supposed to be put to work. You also talked about the ECB and their exposure, and their exposure is large, and you seem concerned. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, the thing is, you see, that you've got countries like Greece stuck inside this Eurozone, a currency it was never suited to, a currency it should never have joined. And what's been happening over the course of the last couple of years is the European Central Bank has often been the only buyer of Greek debt. So they've got a massive, massive exposure to Greece and the other troubled countries, particularly those in the Mediterranean. Now, the day that Greece leaves the euro, and believe me, it will, the day Greece leaves the euro and goes back to the drachma, the ECB is sitting on a massive paper loss on those bonds that it's bought. And at that moment in time, the ECB itself is bust. It is illiquid. And then, under the European treaties, to recapitalise, it has to go and get fresh capital from other countries that themselves have already been bailed out and are in trouble. So the fact is that actually, you could argue now the medicine is actually killing the patient. And the time we grow up, the time we recognise that actually Spain, Portugal, Italy, certainly Greece and probably Ireland too, the time we recognise that they need to leave the Eurozone, frankly, is now. And if that nettle is not grasped, then my fear is that the markets over the course of this summer could just overwhelm the whole thing.
Wow, Mr. Farage, you definitely, I'm glad I had you on a Monday because I wasn't all that optimistic when I got out of bed this morning anyway. Welcome, and hopefully you'll come back at another point when we turn another chapter in the Greek saga. Back to you, Melissa Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick Santelli.